something short, and definitely there's not enough words for us to say just how much we appreciate all of the kind words and cards and just the support that we've gotten here in this church community. Not only being the new pastor and new family here, but especially celebrating our 1 year of marriage. We are so blessed on this journey together, and we couldn't have asked for 2 more supportive communities in Evanston in this church. So we really are so appreciative for all of the love and the support that you've given us on this journey. Most of you may know, or may not know, that Kristen and I, along with the journey of life, are also continuing to embark on another journey that we've been on. I'll let you in on a little secret. This is actually a journey that we've been on for a bit longer than we've been married. And that is the journey of pet ownership. By the interesting looks that I'm getting, I'm guessing some of you are walking on this journey with us. We are the proud owners of Jeffrey, a 5-year-old dachshund mix. Ball of energy, rambunctious, excited dog who has an awesome set of vocal cords. Some of you are laughing and met it. Jeffrey has brought us a whole lot of joy most days, and we are very thankful to have him on this journey of life, and we're really appreciative for Jeffrey. And there's some days where he has us scratching our heads as well. Like most animals, Jeffrey has his own unique set of quirks, we'll call them. The people that we got Jeffrey from actually believe that he may have been abused before they got him. So anyone who's ever had a rescue pet or an animal that has been abused understands that there's a whole lot more issues that come along with that kind of animal. There's a lot of reparative work that we're doing in his life from the traumatic past that he's experienced. So Jeffrey has his own set of issues. Anyone who's ever tried to pet Jeffrey or come up near Jeffrey or really just breathe the wrong way when Jeffrey is in your presence will understand that he has his own set of issues. So with a dog who has his own set of quirks, my wife and I have begun to dread this one thing that is necessary for having dogs or any pet. We've begun to dread our trips to the vet. For a dog who doesn't like people or being poked or prodded or handled, the vet is not a good place for him to be. Because that is exactly where they poke and prod and handle him. We recently went to the vet after a wonderful recommendation up here on 441. They were wonderful with us, really helped us in this transition. But we had one of these experiences, and Kristen and I have gotten into our own routine. One of us takes the dog, the other one signs it in. We try to get in, get out, nobody gets hurt. But along the ways, something seems to happen. So one of us will sign him in, and after he's signed in, we'll wait in the waiting room. Kristen and I probably more nervous than he is as he's taking in all of the new smells, all of the new people, the new sounds, the new voices. And inevitably, there's usually some interesting other animals and other creatures there, so he is really nervous. So as we try to keep his attention on the treats right in front of him, we're hoping to just get in to one of the examinations room where it can just be us and Jeffrey. So we get into the room, the door shuts, and we're spending a lot of time encouraging him, petting him, we give him some treats, and he inevitably starts to do his rounds around the room, sniffing each wall, looking back at us periodically for a reassuring glance, but to no avail. He knows something's up. It's different. This is not what he's used to. Jeff is clearly out of his comfort zone. As much as we try to encourage him and tell him that it's okay, he knows something's not right. And that's confirmed in a few minutes later when the vet tech comes in. And of course, Jeffrey greets him, as he's greeted many of you, with a rousing round of barks. He gets back on his haunches, his hair raises up, he postures, he barks as loudly as he can. And then it's interesting. Once he goes through those gamut of responses, his defense mechanisms all out on the table, when he sees that those don't work, we see this pitiful response of a dog who was once on his hind legs, now turns back at Kristen and I and makes a beeline to hide behind our legs. She and I laugh, and it's really hard for us a straight face just because of how pitiful it is. But we're struck by the innocence of Jeffrey's quest for security. He'd give anything just to have things back to where he's comfortable. This is a situation where he's inundated with all these new sensations, new people, new things, and for an animal who has experienced some negativity when new things came into his life before, I can only imagine the type of thoughts that are running through his mind. As we watched our pathetic little dog hide behind our legs, I was reminded, you know what? He and I aren't so different in our own lives. When we face difficulties, he and I have pretty much the same response. I'm not sure what it is about life, but we can all experience the unnerving fear that life brings, can't we? We may have our list of defense mechanisms that we use to try to keep a distance between us and struggle, us and loss and anxiety. But at the end of the day, I often find that I'm just as scared facing life as he is facing the bad. For me, it calls to mind an image that David paints for us in the Psalms. A very famous psalm, Psalm 23. This is a psalm that we frequently hear at funerals. And it paints the picture of a man's journey throughout his life with the Lord. And the image that he uses is that of a sheep and his relationship with the shepherd. And he talks about all of the different stages of his life that he walks with his shepherd. I would argue that probably the most famous verse in this scripture is the 4th verse, which says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." With those words, the valley of the shadow of death, the psalmist is describing the lowest point in his life. Suffering, tragedy, and loss, any of which can strike fear to us and hit us at our core. By the valley of the shadow of death, he's speaking of points where our frailty is exposed. We are left vulnerable. It's interesting because he doesn't just say death or loss, which would be traumatic enough. He simply says the shadow of death. What a powerful adversary we have, where simply the shadow is enough to strike fear to us. The mere glimpses of death cause us worry, anxiety, fear, trepidation. No matter who you are or what situation you're in, I would argue that we all encounter our valleys, many of us on a daily basis. Maybe it's a physical thing. Maybe there's a bully in your life at school, and at work, somebody who threatens you in such a way that you wonder how you're going to make it through the day unscathed. Maybe it's that dreaded and unexpected medical diagnosis. That thing that you've been praying and praying would pass, and alas, that's what it is. Maybe you've lost a loved one. I can't think of a lower time in our lives than when we experience death and loss. Maybe it's those financial struggles you've been having. That job that you recently just lost. See, we still the serenity that he finds in God in the midst of those things. I invite you to listen once again to the beautiful words that he pens in our psalm this morning. Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. He says, he alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I am trusting him. For he will rescue you from every trap and protect you from the fatal plague. He will shield you with his wings. He will shelter you with his feathers. His faithful promises are your armor and your protection. Do not be afraid of the terrors of the night. Do not fear the dangers of the day, nor dread the plague that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday. It's pretty amazing what he's asking us to do, isn't it? He's talking about a shelter in the midst of all of these reasons not to find rest. Death and destruction and pestilence and fear. David boldly calls God a refuge. What an awesome image for us this morning. God is protection from our enemies. God is a place of safety where we can rest. As believers, David is telling us that we have a sanctuary in God. We have a peace that this world cannot touch. What a joy that is for us today. Not that you need any reminders, but as Christians, life doesn't get easier. I wish it did. Anyone who has been on this journey of faith for any period of time will understand that life doesn't stop. Tragedies don't just go away. Bad news still happens. The church knows you've rallied around one another in times of bad news and loss and suffering. Life continues in the midst of our journey with God. But what David tells us is that God gives us hope. God gives us a deep, abiding faith that wars and suffering and death and loss, anxiety are not the end of our stories. I love the image that he gives us of a bird sheltering its chicks. It's like the mother bird knows exactly what the chicks need. Just as life escalates, terror looms in, the mother graciously and gracefully wraps the chicks up in her wings, puts her life in front of the chicks to make sure that they are protected. Friends, many of us need that embrace right now. Many of us need that close comfort that God offers right now. And I pray that this will ring especially true for you this morning. You see, what Kristen and I saw in our dog that day at the vet was simply his search for peace in the midst of life's chaos. Jeffrey was wanting true peace and comfort. I find it interesting that David uses a word to describe where this peace comes from this morning. That same word where peace is found is the same word he uses in the 23rd Psalm as the exact place where fear resides. In verse 1, David says, "Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty." There's that word again. In this case, just the shadow of the Almighty provides him rest and safety. Even on the fringe of terror and fear, mere glimpses of God provide him shelter. Even the faintest glimpse of God provides us with relief. What a powerful image that David has given us. Because you'll remember when he described the sheep's journey with the shepherd, shadow is used in a very different, very scary way. That same word that describes the vast reach of terror and fear, here it describes the scope of God's protection. So it's an interesting paradox that David gives us, isn't it? The valley of the shadow of death and the shadow of the true rest and comfort in God. So what David is showing us is that in reality, folks, our life is filled with shadows, both kinds. We walk through glimpses of those each day. Those shadows are everywhere. Fortunately, in this world, we're reminded of all of the shadows of fear and death and loss. But the shadow of the Almighty is everywhere. Like Jeffrey at the vet, all of us will face uncertainty, change, and fear. But there's an important question that needs to be asked as we walk through life in the midst of these dueling shadows. I want to ask you, what shadow are you choosing to dwell in? What shadow is consuming you, washing over you? What shadow is present in your mind as you walk through life? Is it the shadow of fear? The shadow of worry and anxiety? See, as Christians, we've been called to look up. Even when this world is pulling our head down to what's right in front of us. We serve a God who transcends any fear and loss and death that life could bring our way. So as we move forward this day and head to the busyness of our lives, may we be a people who choose the shadow of the Almighty, even when we walk through the darkest valleys. May we reside in the Lord's shadow